Hirschberg. I'm faculty at the Institute of Social and Economic Research, and I get the pleasure of welcoming you all here today. I also first get to introduce to you Ralph Townsend, who's the new director of ISER, just getting his feet under him. And then, but you will get a chance to hear more from him soon, I hope. And please, if you're interested in hearing about his vision for ISER, come by our office. But I was really excited when Dr. Kimmel approached us about hosting this event, because it really is in keeping with what I personally believe is so important about our community, that we are valuing and moving forward on welcoming all residents. And making this an exciting and inclusive place. I was just back from a conference in St. Petersburg where not everybody is made to feel welcome. And
Russia.
Yes.
Not Florida.
Not Florida, Russia. And being with people from northern cities and communities all over, we get a little bragging rights now with this initiative. So anyway, I'm excited to hear more about this. We have 4 panelists, and are you going to speak and then take questions after? Is that how we're going to do this?
We're not going to speak for very long.
Okay, great. So we have Dr. Mara Kimmel, who will, are you going to introduce the concepts and all that? And then Delaney Mitchell, who is a UAA student, and yes, superlative. Well, I'm going to say this is why we have a lot of bragging that we get to do about our students, and sometimes I think people in Alaska don't know just how good our students are. But I'm really excited to have Delaney here, because I really think she's that example of what UAA means in terms of the quality of the students that we get and the quality of the opportunities they have to become our future leaders. Then we have our mayor, Ethan Berkowitz, and Bill Popp, who's the head of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. So take it away.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I really particularly want to thank ISER for hosting us, Ralph and Diane and Linda Leask, who I don't think is here right now, but you all were fabulous in responding so quickly and so well to allowing us to host this event here. I want to take a moment and recognize an amazing individual in our state and a leader, Vic Fisher, who's sliding around on his right now. Thanks, Vic. And then Dr. Dina Pramo, who is also here with us. So we're thrilled because we also have Katie Bisson in the back. I'm gonna talk about welcoming Anchorage in just a second, but I also really wanted to thank our panelists today, Delaney Mitchell, who, as Diane said, is, I think, one of many, but an extremely amazing, shining example of what this community can produce. And what Delaney is doing is really opening up the portals for us to understand who else are shining examples in our city, and people we need to be paying attention to if we want to really head into the future with gusto and with passion and with the capacity to deal with some of the issues that are heading our way. And then Ethan Berkowitz, mayor and my lovely spouse, who, thanks to you and your vision, have made this all possible. So we're really, really grateful. This issue, immigration, and the rights of refugees and immigrants to be full participants in our community is something, it's been a passion of mine for the last 2 decades. And it is something that I have realized is not a partisan issue. This is an issue of information. So the divide, as it revolves policy formation around immigrant rights, is not one of Republican versus Democrat. It's one of whether we have information or we don't. And then what do we do with that information? And so Ethan, as mayor, has really opened the door for our community to embrace that idea. And then we also have Bill Popp here, whose amazing work on economic development in our community is really groundbreaking, very pivotal. And Bill and Moira Sullivan in the back have really embraced and become full partners with the Welcoming Anchorage movement here. And without you all, we could not do this work. The other partners that we have are the, this is great. I'm going to stop the wheel and stop talking and let the wheeling happen. We have a lot of students here, right? High school and college. Raise your hand if you're a college or a high school student. Excellent. This is perfect. Thank you. A couple of our other partners who I need to name are Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has continually been on the front lines of integration and welcoming, even before Welcoming Anchorage became a thing, and even before the Welcoming America movement started a couple of years ago. Wells Fargo has always been a leader in our community, and we're so grateful to them for their continued support. And then finally, the state of Alaska, the Department of Commerce and Community Economic Development, has been a partner as well. And they were really involved in the creation or the capacity for the creation of this report. There's two reports up here which I'll call your attention to, but the first was one that we released a couple of months ago called The Contributions of New Americans in Alaska. And it's a report that deals with statewide economic contributions of immigrants and refugees. And today what we're releasing is a report that's more focused on the community of Anchorage. So please feel free to come up here and get a copy if you want, and if there aren't enough copies or if you prefer online versions, we have these on the municipal website that you should feel free to take advantage of. I also wanted to just say that this event kicks off Welcoming Week, which is a program of the Welcoming Anchorage movement, which again I'll describe in just a second. But Welcoming Week, we've got a series of events, and there's lists up here. We invite you to join us as many times as you can over the course of the next week, I think. There was an event late last week with Ethan and CCEL here on campus where I wasn't able to be there.
It was great.
It was fantastic. Standing room only. And then also, please feel free to take a poster if you like, if you want to feel like you are a welcoming person. And what would be great is if you took a picture of yourself with this or with Daryl Hess's I'm a welcomer upside
That's
down.
the Australian way.
It's Australia, right?
Yeah. We would invite you all at the end of this to come join us and take some photos and then hashtag Welcoming Anchorage or Welcoming ANC. Which reminds me, I also just want to give kudos to Daryl Hess, the municipal ombuds, who has been absolutely instrumental in creating this initiative. So the Welcoming Anchorage initiative was born out of a nationwide effort to create better dialogue and discussion about immigration reform. And so we are seeing in this recent election, obviously, that immigration is a huge issue, a very divisive issue. And as I said just a few moments ago, I think that the reason that we are divided over this is because of the lack of information that we have. And so what has been an incredible synergy of events includes the fact that, so I've lived in this state for many years. I've worked with immigrants and refugees for about 2 decades. And what I noticed when I was working with these communities is that, first of all, people didn't understand that Alaska is home to many people from all over the world. We know that now, and we know that now in large part thanks to somebody who couldn't be part of our panel today, Dr. Chad Farrell, who basically blew the lid off the fact that we are the most diverse community in the country. We all talk about, and Dr. Pramo knows too, that we speak over 100 different languages in our school district, but we also have 2 of the most ethnically diverse neighborhoods in our district. We've got 4 of the top most ethnically diverse high schools, more than 20 of the top most ethnically diverse elementary schools. All of these things are phenomenal. They create incredible opportunity, but they also pose some interesting obstacles. And so we've come together and we joined the Welcoming America movement a year before Ethan took office. But since Ethan has taken office, we've really embraced this idea and we've really embraced this initiative. And so we're proud today to be able to present to you some actual numbers about the role and the economic potential that immigrants and refugees bring to our community. And so what we're beginning to see is that, in fact, when you really have an honest discussion about the participation of immigrants and refugees, we begin to see the incredible potential that people can bring to our community. And what that's allowing us to do is to begin to also understand some of those barriers to entry for people. And when I talk about barriers to entry, I mean barriers to our economy, barriers to full engagement in our community, barriers to full engagement in our society. And so what we're hoping to do with the Welcoming Anchorage initiative is move beyond this idea that we just herald the fact that we're the most diverse community in the country, and move into some action. And so all of this documentation allows us as a government, allows Ethan to be able to say there is data that supports the fact that we need to tear down some barriers. And I think, and hopefully Ethan and Bill will discuss this more, but at a time when our state is facing such incredible economic uncertainty, we need all hands on deck. And we need to make sure that people who have the skills and the expertise that can really add to our economy and our community are able to do so. And so that's the whole point behind the Welcoming Anchorage initiative, is that we are trying to really fully understand the breadth of experiences and then opportunities that we have as a city to really open up and welcome people and really work together towards creating a great positive future for our community. So the report is up here. All I wanted to do is just throw out a couple of highlights from the report, and then I'm going to pass this over to Delaney, who's going to talk about some of the incredible research that she's been able to do. So these two reports that I referenced earlier are done by an organization called Partnership for a New American Economy, which is an organization based out of New York. And they're great. They use all kinds of existing data to really compile specific information for both states and cities around the country in order to shift the debate. But what we've been able to do, thanks to Dr. Farrell and to Delaney, is really take that information and inform our own research at the city. This is also something that has been an amazing opportunity to collaborate between the university and the municipality. And so I'm grateful for the university's leadership and willing to work with the city on this. So in this report, it's a 4-page report, very easy to read. There's just a couple of statistics that I really want to point out. The immigrant community here is entrepreneurial to a greater degree than are represented proportionally. So our city has about 8.5% of our city are immigrants, foreign-born Americans. 14.2% of entrepreneurs in our community, people who are self-employed, are non-citizens, or foreign-born. Maybe at this point they become citizens. So there's this sort of disproportionate contribution that people are able to make. In Anchorage, with the 1,800 foreign-born people that we have working for their own businesses, they've been able to generate $37 million in business income that goes into our economy. Foreign-born residents are more likely to start new businesses in Anchorage than US-born folks. And then to focus even more so on the university, there are about 315 students enrolled in UAA and APU who are foreign-born. These students are supporting 43 local jobs and contributing $7.5 million to spending in our community. If we are lucky enough to keep half of these students in our city, we'll increase local jobs by 72, and we'll increase our local GDP by over $20 million. These are real numbers and real opportunities for us to move forward, and real opportunities for us to ensure that we are welcoming, that we're tearing down barriers, and that we're understanding that when we pull together like this, and when we open ourselves up to all of Anchorage's residents who want to make this the place to live, work, and play, and want to make this home, there will be benefits that accrue to all of us. And so again, this is the kind of information, I think, that is necessary to allow us to have an honest and viable discussion about the roles of immigrants and refugees in Anchorage and in the state, and hopefully in the nation. And hopefully we can start to shift and engage with each other more responsibly using information like that we're presenting today. So we really want to thank you all for coming. We're really thrilled to see this great response. I'm going to turn it over now to UAA student extraordinaire Delaney Mitchell.
Thank you, Mara. As Mara mentioned, Anchorage is an incredible natural case study in diversity. We understand that immigrants and refugees make very meaningful contributions to this diversity, but they also face a range of challenges, some universal and others unique to Alaska. I study these challenges in the context of employment barriers. There are a variety of barriers that affect both immigrants and refugees in our community, namely transportation, language skills, and childcare. But I want to speak today about one very specific issue that directly contributes to brain waste, which is certification leveling. Certification leveling is the process which individuals undertake to have foreign credentials assessed by a U.S. standard scale. So this includes both university education and vocational and other training program certifications. I've had the opportunity to do 2 research projects in partnership with the municipality and 1 in partnership with Refugee Assistance and Immigration Services. In a project that I did with Refugee Assistance, I identified that 53% of refugees that attended a vocational training program, either in their country of origin or in a country prior to coming to the U.S., were not able to certify their skill set with some sort of formal documentation. Obviously, this is a huge hindrance to employment when you come to Alaska and you're trying to find a job, but don't have documentation to prove the training that you've received. Another 40% reported having attended university, but were unable to produce a diploma to certify, again, their skill set. So these are huge groups of people that are not able to utilize their full skill set in their occupation due to an inability to assess their credentials. Among the immigrant community, the numbers are smaller but still present. Just under 13% reported having issues getting diplomas recognized, and just under 12% reported having issues getting vocational training recognized. And among both of these groups, cost and accessibility to services were the primary barriers that were keeping people from enduring this process. It can also be quite expensive and time-consuming for individuals to undertake, but with proper support, it's certainly doable. So despite the fact that relatively large groups of people are affected by this lack of certification, only 37% of the sample that I have worked with are currently not employed in Alaska, but even more positively among that group, nearly 80% are actively seeking employment. So what that means is that we have a massive group of people who are highly trained or highly educated, perhaps both, and just need assistance in breaking down some of these barriers that are preventing them from being employed at their full potential and for us to benefit from their full skill set here in our economy. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So next we'll be hearing from Bill Popp, who is the head of the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation.
Thank you, Mara. Good morning. Just making sure you're awake out there.
They missed us the afternoon already.
Yeah. Oh, actually afternoon. All right, see, you're paying attention. You all said good morning back to me too, so you're all in this with me. You know, I came here today to talk about the economic opportunities of immigrants, but I think it's always important to look at the context in which we're currently dealing with. And so just a quick recap of where things stand today. We are finally at the end of nearly a three-decade-long period of unending growth in the state of Alaska, and in particular here in the city of Anchorage. We have seen pretty much nonstop growth since the late 1980s, with one small blip during the global recession, which was more self-inflicted because we were afraid it was coming our way. Little did we know. Today we are dealing with a new normal. Resource extractive industries, while still critical and probably a foundational element, will be a foundational element for our economy for several generations to come, will no longer have the ability to float our boat all by itself when you look at it from an economic point of view. Since the beginning of this year, we're down about 5,000 jobs on a statewide basis average. When you look at the different industries that rely on the oil and gas industry or the oil and gas industry itself. About 2,000 jobs lost in the oil patch, a little over 1,000 jobs lost in the construction industry, and if you're an engineer or an architect would want to be, I'm here to tell you you're going to have a little bit of a tough road to hoe because we're down about 1,800 jobs in the professional and business services sector. And those are the three industries that we see the most pronounced direct effect of this low price of a barrel of oil. And we are in the midst of a global technological disruption brought on by the fracking innovation that has only been in place for less than a decade, and yet has turned the world energy markets on their ear. And most of the prognostications that I'm seeing tell me that because of the incredible untapped potential that is out there globally that has not even been touched yet by the new fracking technology, we're probably looking at a new normal that will keep oil prices at $60 or below. These are what a lot of the pundits are starting in the oil patch are starting to get their head around. That because of the driving down of costs of oil and gas extraction through fracking and its competitiveness now, given the vast resources that are available all over the world, we do not have the peak oil challenge that we were dealing with just as recently as 2008, 2009. And now suddenly we are awash in petroleum and probably will be. That's a challenge for our Treasury and our economy, and we're going to need all hands on deck. So that's why when we look at the immigration issues and the untapped asset that is represented by immigrants to our state in terms of innovation, entrepreneurship, and pure and simple workforce to fill many of the jobs that we don't have the population to fill because we have a declining state population. We peaked in 2013 and we're expecting it to drop by about 5,000 off of that peak that we saw in 2013 of about 301,000 here in Anchorage. And that's going to be a challenge for us. When I took this job in 2007, one of the biggest complaints that I had from business was the inability to find qualified workforce to fill thousands and thousands of jobs in Anchorage and across the state. And you know what's interesting? I still get those complaints today in many different industries. Some of them high paying, some of them not. But there is still a challenge in terms of qualified workforce. And the immigrant population, I believe, is underutilized to fill many of those jobs. Another aspect of this is the fact that we have significant challenges in just the broader sense of entrepreneurship and the innovation that immigrants bring to the entrepreneurial community from a different way of looking at things and not being caught up in the weeds that we sometimes find ourselves in the entrepreneurial community of what we know as opposed to what we can do. You know, what we know often becomes a barrier to what we can do. Think about that. And, you know, there are any number of old sayings on that one that I'll leave alone because my staff goes crazy every time I start doing it. I believe strongly that an immigrant population initiative of the type that we are now talking about is critical towards taking Anchorage down a new path and taking our state down a new path to new economic diversity and new economic growth. But it's going to take a long-term investment point of view, a long-term strategy point of view. It's not going to be the instant gratification that we've all come to know and love because every time we had a problem, the price of a barrel of oil would pop up where we needed it to be and would solve all our problems. Now it's going to take some hard work, and now it's going to take some investment, and now it's going to take us solving our fiscal situation in the state and giving ourselves the ability to now plan for the future, and immigration is going to be a critical part of that plan. So that's kind of my quasi-economic analysis as well as my pontificating on where we need to go. So there you go.
And now we'll hear from my favorite mayor ever.
Yeah, I still have to do dishes. I know that.
Yes.
So let me see a quick show of hands. Who here was born in another country?
Very good.
Okay. Who here had a parent that was born in another country? Who here had a grandparent that was born in another country? Okay. Take a look around the room and see how many are just, since all you put your hands down, even though I didn't say put your hands down. That's the power of immigration to this country. That's the power of it. And that's why it's so important that we use that power today. Because as Bill said, we're at an interesting crossroads in the state history. I mean, we look at the decline in the role of oil, and there's another way that I look at it. At its peak, every Alaskan got about 4 barrels per day. There's about 500,000 Alaskans. We were running more than 2 million barrels a day down the pipe. Now that we've got almost 750,000 Alaskans, we're producing 500,000 barrels a day. That's about 2/3 of a barrel per day per person. So the role of oil has dramatically changed. And at the same time, what's happening is that the role that the state has played, particularly in relationship with local governments, is in a period of transition. We used to count on a fairly large amount of support from the state for local government. We would get $20, $30 million a year in direct money from the state. Now it's down to about 4 or 5. That means we have to backfill the problem. And how do we do this? I mean, we live in a time where political rhetoric is oftentimes, frequently, short on facts. And I think that you combat fears with facts. I think you make policies based on the understanding of what your assets are. We are underutilizing the people in our community in order for us to be self-sufficient. And I think it's one of those Alaskan values is that we're independent and self-reliant people. But we're independent and self-reliant because we've always kept an eye on one another. We've always been able to rely on each other in order to make the most of our community. Well, we've got a group of people in Anchorage right now, in Alaska, who, if they had better venues, better opportunities, could contribute even more. And if we don't take advantage of that opportunity, that's as much a squandering of a resource as it is to leave oil in the ground or to not move gas down a pipe. We can't strand those resources, those human resources. And that's why it's particularly critical for us today to what my darling bride likes to call actualizing diversity. I mean, we talk a lot about how diverse a community we are. It's a source of pride for us. But what does that mean? And how do we capitalize on it? And I mean capitalize in the most capitalistic way of it. How do we take the people in this community and use them as the fuel for economic growth? We have to know who they are. We have to know, as any economist will tell you, we have to know what the barriers are for them to enter the workplace, the barriers that exist for them to participate in job creation, in entrepreneurialism. And when we understand those root problems, which Delaney outlined very quickly as transportation, childcare, language access, credentialing, if we understand that, then we can take those barriers down. And if we take those barriers down, we unlock tremendous potential. So there's a real stake for all of us in making sure that every one of us has the opportunity to participate in the economy. And not just participate at the most basic level, but participate in a way that maximizes our own potential. Because if we do that, then I think we get to be the self-sufficient, self-reliant people that we are. Because Alaska and Anchorage have tremendous resources and tremendous opportunity moving ahead. In spite of the decline of the role of oil, in spite of the changing role of the state, think of where we are. We're still the air crossroads of the world. As the Arctic opens, we're still the gateway to everything else. We're equidistant between Europe and Asia and North America, which means they're all equally close to us. And if we have a population that is able to maximize the potential of our location in order to find the niche markets that make us a unique place both in time and space, then we've got economic opportunities that none of us individually can dream of, but I hope each one of you has a chance to think on. So making the most of who we are is a critical piece of understanding the role that immigrants can have in our community.
So before we open it up for discussion and questions, I'd just add one thing to what Ethan said just now, which is in addition to being the air crossroads of the world and equidistant to all of these nations, the other opportunity we have is with the folks in this room who are part of the fact that we speak over 100 different languages in our school and the incredible work, and we're so grateful to the school district for developing the seal of biliteracy. We now have the capacity and the resources to go to those nation states, to go to those countries, communicate in languages that people in those countries understand and enter into economic relationships with folks in ways that I think are absolutely unique and amazing for our city. I wanted to just reiterate another thing that Ethan said, which I think you stated it very well.
Probably because you told me it before.
No, I didn't. This one was all yours. The definition of brain waste, that's a great definition of brain waste, which is we are leaving human resources stranded. And so that is one of the huge efforts that we're doing in this Welcoming Anchorage initiative, is we are trying to figure out ways to capitalize, to bring people in, and to make sure that we, again, are all moving forward together. I wanted to just give two more acknowledgements, people and entities who have been critical to this work. I neglected to mention, I did mention the New American Economy folks and the Welcoming America movement, and they combined last year to create an opportunity called Gateways for Growth. And Anchorage was one of 5 communities around the country that received funding from Gateways for Growth. And so we've been using that. We will use that resource to, we've used it to help facilitate the creation of these documents, but we're also going to be embarking on a strategic integration mapping effort, not calling it plan, where we're bringing folks together at the end of September in a room to begin a process where we're going to be talking about how we can break down some of these barriers. And so if anybody in this room is interested in participating in that event, it's September 19th from 1:30 to 4. Come see me afterward. And we 29th, what did I say?
19th.
That's today.
Good, you're paying attention. That's good.
Going right over there. Thank you. Come see me after this, and we can get you signed up. And the other person I really need to acknowledge, because she is the locomotive behind this, is Amy Kaufman. And Amy single-handedly has been making sure, along with Barb Jacobs in the back of the room over there, that for the first time ever, this city is compliant with its legal and moral obligations under the Civil Rights Act, and is breaking down barriers to language obstacles that have existed for people in this city forever. And so thanks to Amy's incredible work, the municipality is in the process of developing language access plans, which, like I said, are required under federal law. For any entity that gets federal funding, you have to provide access to services for limited English proficient Alaskans. But as we hopefully are beginning to talk about today, it's more than just a legal issue. It is an economic issue, and it is a justice issue. We need to make sure that the doors of our community are open wide so that everybody who wants to walk through them can. So again, I want to thank you all. I really want to thank the panelists, and now I'd love to engage everybody in conversation. Diane.
And I have colleagues here who will back me on this. And one of the issues that really affects what Delaney brought up is that in this community, we have decimated the adult education infrastructure. We no longer have community schools that used to provide some of these services, and we no longer have university services to prepare the educators who provided those services. And we're struggling even now in terms of, obviously, the budget cuts that we face, both K-12 and higher education, to think about how we meet the needs of our young students. But the lack of an adult education infrastructure means that there's very, very few places that an adult, whether or not English is their first language, can go for this. And so it compounds that you've got competition also from people who need retraining. You have people who didn't graduate high school because back in the good old days you could get some pretty darn good paying jobs without a high school degree. And now, between changes to our resource extractive industries and because people's backs hurt after a while, they come seeking an opportunity and they find limited resources and strained resources. So I do think, and I'm look at my calendar on the 29th, but I think we need to rethink funding and support for non-traditional students and adult students. And boy, I wish we could take back what we had done earlier, but now we need to really bring this back up.
So people who use the state's fiscal crisis as an excuse for the kind of austerity that cripples us moving into the future, that's a complete lack of leadership and a complete lack of vision. I mean, I look at Texas had an economic problem in the 70s when the price of oil turned down, at that time, they invested more in their university system, because the way out of a resource-dependent economy, the way to add value to resources, the way to capitalize on your intellectual abilities, especially in a time of a global intellectual economy, is to invest in your people. And I have not heard any hue and cry from the university community in terms of pushback against the budget cuts coming out of Juneau. I mean, who here is a university student? Okay, how many of you have complained to your legislators or to the state about cuts to their programs? That's not enough. There was a time in this country when these kind of cuts went through. If people cared about the quality of education, they would be marching. They would be complaining. And being passive in the face of poor policy, there's no excuse for that. Everybody has a stake in the outcome here. Everybody needs to get engaged.
So we want to see a march from here after this. Delaney, did you have anything you wanted to add about that topic, or what your research is beginning to unfold on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. Certification leveling is not the only component. We have individuals who, particularly in the refugee community, have been deprived the opportunity to work for a number of years, perhaps maybe more than that. And so adult internships and retraining programs are really essential to what you're saying. I definitely agree.
Which I think is part of the other reason behind what we're doing. Is what we've noticed is that people are coming, as Delaney said, people are coming to the United States with skills and with experiences, and then they end up working in the back of a Burger King from midnight to 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. And that's just a horrible waste. I mean, if you look at it in strict economic terms, that means that we have people who are underemployed, not making enough money to buy a house. As we all know, our only tax base in the city are property taxes, so they're not contributing to the tax base as well as they could. They're not able to have the consumer power that we would hope that they could. So it is costing us as a community when we don't expect more from ourselves, when we think it's okay to make these people work in the back of a Burger King from 12 at night to 5 in the morning. It also squanders any opportunity for learning English, which is one of the #1 reasons that people don't move ahead career-wise. And so a lot of this work is looking at well-being in our community and making sure that everybody has a chance to enhance their own well-being and their own opportunities. If you want to work in the back of a Burger King, phenomenal. More power to you. I heartily support that. A lot of these people, though, are just in the position where they're told that at first you should just get a survival job, and that's fine, and we'll deal with that. But that's not good enough, I don't think. Dr. Prim?
Hi.
I was wondering if, through your research, if you collected any data on those that weren't of working age, non-adults, and how their children are any barriers that you see for which the school district could work.
So the data that I have is ranging from individuals who are 18 years old until about 64 years old. So we do have quite a plethora there, people who are not yet ready to enter the workforce, as well as ones who have spent their entire life already in the workforce and have retired. But a second-generation immigrant is an issue that I have not addressed yet, but would be an interesting, definitely follow-up project, what we're working on now.
So that's for Hannah to work on.
Hi, my name's Glenn Patrick. I go to South High School. My question was, what we talk a lot about here is like economic reform. We talk about like certification, English learning issues. When we talk about all these issues, what can we do as citizens besides just writing for legislators? Like, how can we get involved as a citizen or as like just as an average Joe?
You take that one.
Me as an average Joe?
Yep.
Not
that you're an average Joe.
No, I can certainly say that when I entered university, I knew very little about immigration, and I just sought out opportunities within my university. I spoke with professors and attempted to engage on a personal level and had a lot of support there, which helped me land internships like my one in the mayor's office. So certainly contact your educators. The school district is an amazing resource, and everyone's there to support you and make sure that you succeed. So definitely chat with people who are a bit older than you and are more well-connected that can get you engaged.
Kelly and Hannah, can you guys raise your hands? Okay. So those are your colleagues at South High. They're helping us with a series of events coming up on welcoming. There's a walk together that we're going to be doing on October 22nd. There are also a series of conversations that Todd Houston of South High is helping to coordinate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there are events and there are frameworks and there are internship opportunities that you can get involved with through your teachers, through the city, and again, sorry, Amy, you're going to kill me, but contact the mayor's office and we can see what we can do. We're trying to not have a gazillion interns right now, but there are
enough
plenty.
chairs.
Yeah, there aren't enough chairs. But there are amazing opportunities, and then also I would encourage you to have conversations amongst yourselves, with your families, and with your friends at school, because again, this is not a partisan issue. This is an issue of information and education. And so when you engage in conversations about people who are immigrants and refugees, and again, I will just highlight that even though many of you raised your hands as having a very close relationship, if not an immigrant yourself, with somebody who migrated here, it is an invisible population. It is the most invisible and marginalized population we have in this city. And so familiarize yourself with the information. Reach out to people in your schools who have come here from other places and welcome them. Take it on yourself. This is all about individual action that then becomes collective action.
Mara, if I could. Anybody here from East High? One. Go T-Birds.
Former T-Birds.
Okay, up here too, class of 77. Okay, if you want to know another thing that you can do, get outside the four walls of your school and talk to some of the folks at the most diverse high school in the United States, East Anchorage High School. And if they're too busy, talk to the second most diverse high school, Bartlett. Have a conversation with students and with and learn from them, not just from within your own school, but reach out to the incredible opportunity that is the two most diverse high schools in the United States. And they're right here in your own backyard. How does your school collaborate with them on these issues and come to common ground on what the path forward should be?
I think the point I want to emphasize, because I agree with all this, this is our city. And every one of us has the chance to shape what it looks like going ahead. And the way you do that is by being part of what goes on. I spent, as mayor, I get to spend a fair bit of time with firefighters and police officers, and they run towards danger. And this city will work best when we run towards issues, when we take them on ourselves, when we're not bystanders to our civics, and when we're participants. And so run towards the issues, because we get to shape it, the city, what it looks like tomorrow and next year, and that's up to all of us.
I'm hearing a lot of the ideas that some have come through my head in my head in the 12 years I've been teaching at East and working with these wonderful ladies. I've been teaching ELL social studies for 12 years from Bartlett to East. And then Saturday we attended, you were there, Mayor, the Anchorage Cultural Summit. Some of the ideas that came out of there, and I think would help all of us here, including the youth, is that having that master calendar of events was one idea that came out of there. Somewhere online where, I mean, it's kind of easy to tell the kids, you know, of course you should go out there for yourselves and seek these out and help others, but our youth today are so busy. I have two at home. I never see them. So, and these are digital, you know, people. If we could put the information into their hands, it's not coddling. There's certain things we just gotta help them with. And if we have that master calendar of events from that school to this school to that part of the city to here to here to there, where we can all go as one community and say, oh, look at that. Ooh, I can do that this time. There are several, I sponsor a club at East called International Club for 10 to 11 years. It's been around, mainly focused on community involvement. That's why we were there on Saturday at that event. I know at one point in the past, South High, there was a student that contacted me who was interested to start something like a multicultural club or international club. I know Diamond has one, I know Bartlett has one. So my task from the meeting is to try to talk to all the teachers who are involved with that and the students and try to maybe have a little bit more of a coordinated,
Great idea.
collaborative kind of activities. I'm gonna stop there because my head's swirling with joy and ideas, and I can go on for 10 minutes.
That's a great idea. I'd like to acknowledge that Representative Garantar just joined us, so thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And then Jackie, you had a
Yeah, I was also responding to the speaker from South when you mentioned, how to get involved, and I know there's other civil organizations like Alaska Common Ground, which is partnered with ISER on a lot of fiscal issues, and they've got a series of fiscal issues forums coming up where they're looking at this changing economy and a lot of what I'm hearing here today. So that's just one plug. But also had another question besides saying there are other organizations. Master Calendar sounds like a really good idea. But Delaney, I was thinking a lot of the barriers that you identified. And I'm thinking about, something like as fundamental as childcare.
Right.
And how when we come together to discuss these issues that face immigrants or refugees or people who are foreign born and come here from elsewhere, often it's the same problems that face everyone else already in our community. So I was just thinking about if there's something unique to that childcare barrier to people, or whether it's the same kind of problem everyone faces, and whether or not we can work together for common purpose that benefits everyone.
No, I definitely think you're correct. Part of it is socioeconomic groups, and definitely childcare is a barrier for a variety of families across Anchorage, not just immigrants and refugees, and it's certainly a universal problem that needs to be addressed.
And just, could you explain the difference between immigrants and refugees?
Yes. I'll do that in a second, but I'd also just add that these reports focus on immigrants and refugees. The Welcoming Anchorage movement, though, is not limited in that focus. And the Welcoming Anchorage movement is looking to be inclusive and reach out to the Alaska Native community, the disabled community, the LGBTQ community, people who have typically experienced barriers. So that is expansive. This work in particular is geared toward that. And does everybody in the room know what the difference between an immigrant and a refugee is? Can you raise your hand if you don't?
Okay, I
Good
don't.
job.
I'll admit it.
You don't?
Of course I do, but I thought that not everyone might be willing to say so.
So a refugee is somebody who is fleeing persecution, but very importantly, somebody who enters the United States with lawful status. So in Anchorage, we have a lot of refugees. We resettle about 150 a year from different parts of the world. But we also have a lot of people who are fleeing persecution, who are called asylum seekers. Those are folks that weren't lucky enough, and I use that term very loosely, to be stuck in a refugee camp, sometimes up to decades. 2 to 3 decades is not unusual to find yourself in a refugee camp before you go through that resettlement process. But an asylee is somebody who comes in the United States by hook or by crook, but they are fleeing the exact same thing that a refugee is fleeing, so political persecution, and they find themselves here. And then once they're here, they seek status. Now the interesting thing and the fortunate thing about people who find themselves asylees in Alaska is, thank goodness we don't have a detention center here. Because around the country, if you are an asylee, oftentimes you have to wait out the length of time it takes to process your paperwork, which can be up to 5 years, in a detention center, which is essentially a jail. And so up here, we're lucky enough to not have that. The different groups of asylees that we have here are primarily, we've got a lot of folks from Central America. I know that we're all very, very aware of what's going on in Syria and Aleppo. People know what Aleppo is, right? And going on, in Europe with that refugee crisis. We're having one of our own, and Alaska is not immune from it in this country, which is the Salvadoran population who are fleeing gang violence. And it's horrific, and I'm sure that each and every one of us in this room knows somebody, whether we know it or not, who has been affected by that violence. And not only in El Salvador, but in Guatemala and Honduras, some of the countries in the Western Hemisphere with the highest crime rates. So that's the other thing, is you never know who you're encountering on the streets or in your classrooms or in your businesses. And so it's always a good idea to be kind, because we never know who we're running across, and we never know what kinds of experiences bring them here.
And building off what you said, Mara, this category of immigrants also includes nearly 20% of individuals, which as you said are fleeing violence as their reason for immigration. So there's a nuance to those titles for sure.
Mara, if I could, I'm going to change topics just a little bit in that I want to share some data from some collaborative sources with what we have now with the new American economy study that we're talking about today. AEDC is a member of the International Economic Development Council, and in 2013 they did a white paper on the economic value of immigration and different aspects of immigration that they felt were important for local economic developers to recognize. And some of the fun stuff that comes out of this is, for example, a Kauffman Foundation study found that between 2006 and 2012, a little over 24% of the engineering companies created in the United States were created by immigrants. And they
Like
ended
Google?
and they generated about $63 billion in sales and employed over 500,000 workers across the United States. That's a pretty powerful number. Another thing, if you want to just get into simple self-interest, which I think is always a fun thing when you're dealing with difficult economic times, immigrant-owned businesses are 60% more likely to export than are non-immigrant owned businesses. Now, if you don't understand what the value of that is, let me put it this way. If you want an economy that's making things and shipping them out of our local region and sending them out into the world, that's what we're talking about. And so if we want to encourage more export-oriented businesses in the state of Alaska, and it's a tough place to export from, unless you're shipping bulk commodity, you want to talk to the immigrant community because there's pretty good odds in your favor that you're going to get some positive results if you can engage the immigrant community more aggressively in setting up business and setting the stage for future economic diversity in our state. And I felt like those two were a couple of good stats that really needed to be talked about in this particular dialogue.
No, that's fantastic, Bill. Thank you. And I will just point out that the two reports that are here take that information and really focus it down first on our state, but then on our city. And so they're full of amazing statistics and facts like that. I'd also just point your attention to, if you go on the New American Economy website, they've got a great, fun, interactive map that you can go on and check out exactly these kinds of statistics and pieces of information about any state in the country. And so again, what's really fun about this is we get to work with people from around the country who are grappling with the same kinds of issues, and we get to plug into those folks and learn some of their best practices as well. We're not reinventing any wheels up here. We're creating good collaborations.
So it seems like the sort of push around this conversation about the economic value of immigrants is directly in response to the conversation happening at the presidential election. Is that, I know that Welcoming Anchorage has, been doing work before this, but I'm just curious, like, how much is it a response to that?
I'd say it's a deeper issue. It's a deeper divide. We've had issues over immigration reform since mid-'80s, I would argue. And there's been all kinds of recent changes to the law, basically since the end of the Clinton era, that have really posed some difficulties for people who are seeking to become entrenched in the American fabric. And so this is a long-standing issue. And I'm happy to talk to you later about some of the specific laws or bills that have come up against barriers that would really be hugely helpful. And if you even look, I mean, this is getting into the weeds, but our economic system and our immigration system don't talk to each other. So we have economies based on types of job classifications that aren't included in any of the immigration categories that you could quote unquote get in line for. And so until those two things start to talk to each other, we're going to continue to have these kinds of issues.
So in other words, this predates the presidential campaign.
I wasn't sure if the Partnership for American Economy was specifically kind of pushing this now because of that. Or...
No, I think immigration reform has been a chronic issue for immigration advocates.
I'd add to that because I just quoted from a study in 2013 from the International Economic Development Council that went to the trouble of putting together a fairly expensive white paper that dove deeply into this issue as an opportunity for local economic developers in any city and in any state in the United States to take advantage of in terms of not overlooking this source of energy for the economy. And we have been, looking for an opportunity to bring this issue up more, and the Welcoming Cities initiative has been just a great entree to start broadening the discussion about how do we take advantage of this significant portion of our population to get them more engaged into the Anchorage economy and to help us find our way down the road to more economic diversification.
And I'd put it this way too, the presidential campaign muddies the waters insofar as you're trying to have a rational conversation about this issue.
So in the interest of time, I just want to point out one more thing, and Moira, maybe, are you still back there? This isn't all about economics, it's a lot about fun too, and it's a lot about filling our bellies with, both our real bellies, but also our psychic bellies, with the impacts and experiences of people from all around the world. And thanks to Moira and to Daryl, we've now been able to get a passport as part of Welcoming Anchorage, and so could you describe that?
Yes, absolutely. So Anna Stone, who also works with the AEDC, and I put together a list of participating restaurants in town that are part of our amazing community of international cuisine here. And we developed a passport that you can download, print out. It's free. Take to any of the participating restaurants to get a little passport stamp or a sticker. And if you get to 5 of those restaurants by the end of this month, we're extending it past Welcoming Week to the 30th so that you have more time to get to more restaurants. You'll be entered to win one of 4 $50 restaurant gift cards from one of the participating restaurants. So if you go to the AEDC website, it's aedcweb.com, or Anchorage Live Work Play Facebook page, or the Welcoming Anchorage Facebook page. You can find that passport, download and print it home, and then take it out with you when you dine at any of our fabulous international restaurants during Welcoming Week.
Which are examples of entrepreneurial Alaskans. So thank you all, and really thank you to the panel. You guys were phenomenal. Thank you to ISER, thank you to Wells Fargo and AEDC and the school district and the State Department of Commerce and Community Economic Development, which is too long a name, and to all the students, particularly in the room who are here. This is your state and your future. And so thanks for that question, because that was a great question. Any number of ways you can get involved. We urge you to get involved, and we'll happily help if you aren't getting where you need to go. So thank you all very, very much.